Okay, welcome to MiniExam 1 demo. What this is just me walking through a similar structure to what you'll see on the MiniExam. And I'm doing this in real time. I'm going to do my best here to give you a sense of how I think about each one of these problems and how they sort of fit together. And part of the goal is to give you some confidence in your own understanding of the material. At least that's the goal. This shouldn't be scary. I know the first one, there's some uncertainty about what it looks like and how difficult it will be. But I expect most of you to do very well on this. And hopefully you'll feel the same way once we get through this. Okay, so let's just start off. The first question is about supply and demand curves for chocolate bars. So we were given both of them right here. So for the first part, we're just asked to graph this. So the first thing to do is just set up the supply and demand graph. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. So we have price on the vertical and quantity on the horizontal. And we want to find a way to plot these. So the first thing to do is to realize that with the demand curve, when the quantity is 0, all we're left with is an intercept of 10. So let's use that as the vertical intercept. And when price is 0, we're left with 10 is equal to 1/2 Q, which means that we have 20 Q. Oops. And that's the horizontal intercept. So that'll go here. And then we just connect these. And that's our demand curve. We know it's linear, so that's our demand curve. Now for the supply curve, we can see it doesn't have an intercept. It goes to the origin. And for every increase in quantity, when quantity goes up by 1, the price goes up by 1/5. So we know this is going to be flat. So it's going to look like something like this. And it doesn't have to be perfect. All we're trying to do is get a sense of what this market structure looks like. We don't have to, stress too much about the actual shapes. So the goal here, we want to find equilibrium price and quantity. So to do that, we want to find P star and Q star. Okay. So all we have to do is use our intuition for equilibrium, and the result that QD will equal QS in equilibrium. And because we don't have subscripts on the P, because price is going to be the same for buyers and sellers in this market, there's no tax, then we can just go ahead and solve this algebraically. So we'll set up 10 minus 1/2 QD is equal to price. And it's just a rearrangement of the demand curve, which is also equal to the supply curve, which is QS, 1/5 QS. Okay. So then we'll use the fact that quantities are equal when we don't have government regulation to go ahead and simplify this equation. So we have 10, we have 1/2, and we'll just put these in parentheses, times q. We're just going to drop the subscripts because we know that the two q's are equal. Okay. One more simplification here. To collect these fractions, we're going to put 10 on the bottom, which means we're going to multiply 1/2 times 5 on top and bottom. So we have 5 over 10 plus 2 over 10 as q. And we can just simplify that because it comes out to be 7 over 10 q. Okay, so then our equilibrium quantity here is just 10 times the inverse of 7 over 10. And that comes out to be 100 over 7. And we'll put a box around this to make it easy for the grader. Okay. So that's our equilibrium quantity. Now the equilibrium price is simply, we can use the supply curve and plug in the quantity into the supply curve. So we know price in equilibrium will be 1/5 times 100 over 7. And we can simplify this. We know there are 5 20s in 100. So that comes out to be 20 over 7 p star. And we'll box this. And lastly, we can go ahead and just label the equilibrium on the graph. So price is 20 over 7 in equilibrium. And we can put a p star is equal. And let's write this out here. Q star is equal to 20 over 7. I'm sorry. I can't spell. I can't copy. Self-deprecating joke that I imagine, at least I hope you're laughing at. Okay. There's no audience doing these videos, although I pretend. Okay. So this is a complete answer here. We've set up the market with our supply and our demand curves, and then we've used a graph and some algebra to find equilibrium price and quantity. Okay, so that's part 1. Part 2 is about competitive statics. So we're going to look at what happens in our market when something outside the market changes. So here we have an agricultural technology which improves the harvesting efficiency of cocoa. And then we're going to look at the market for chocolate bars, which, going back to the original setup here, that's what we're looking at. Okay, so we're not given any numbers here, so there's nothing quantitative we're doing in this problem. All we need to do is set up the relative shifts. Okay, so we have our downward sloping demand curve, our upward sloping supply curve, and let's identify whether it's the supply curve or the demand curve is changing. So we know it's a technology which affects the efficiency of the production of the harvesting of cocoa. So this is actually going to change the supply curve. We don't know exactly what the shape of the shift in the supply curve looks like. All we know is that because efficiency is improving, this is going to make costs go down. So let's just, because we don't know anything about the shape itself, let's just say it shifts down something like this. No matter what the shape is, we get the same result for our market changes. So the first is P star. Actually, let's call this PQ. And then after the new technology, we have P prime and Q prime. Okay. So here's our graph. So we know, and let's use some arrows here just to make clear what the direction is. We see price is decreasing and quantity is increasing. So let's, we could just write this out. So typically when I grade these types of questions, I look for the graph, which really informs our discussion about what's happening in this market. So we have, first, we can say that the price decreases. Say after the new technology, the price decreases. And the second is that the quantity increases. And this is really all we know from the information we're given. There's not a whole lot to go on just from the setup of the question. So this is a fully complete answer here. We're looking for the two changes. We get a shift in the supply curve. And you could even explicitly write this out, and that might even be better. We can say the supply curve shifts down. And that gives us these two results here. Let's make this look a little cleaner. All right. So we've identified everything that's going on that we're aware of in this market. Okay. So we have another comparative statics question here. Essentially, we're saying we're going to look at what happens after the new technology, where the CDC is concerned about the sugar content in chocolate bars. Might be bad for your health. And so what we're asked to do is something similar to part 2, but discussing what happened after both of these effects. So what I'm going to do is actually just take this and copy it down. And if you were presented with a question like this, I wouldn't be opposed to you, and if you didn't have this type of technology, being able to copy and paste, I wouldn't be opposed to you referring back to the first part here and just overlaying your answer on top of your first graph, if you wanted to save some time. That's not a horrible thing to do. But I have the technology, so I'm going to use it. Okay, so we're asked about this CDC announcement. So what we're going to do is think about price and quantity changes. So the first thing to realize is this announcement shifts the demand curve in. And then we'll talk about its effects. So preferences have changed. Willingness to pay is lower. So we get this shift in of the demand curve, and we'll call this D prime. Or we could call it D double prime. It doesn't actually matter. So let's identify the equilibrium. So we have two supply curves and two demand curves, so we have to make sure we're keeping track of which one is which. We're asked to think about what happens after the development of the new harvesting technology. So we want to look at the second supply curve. So we want to intersect the new demand curve with the new supply curve. And that's going to give us P double prime. And then we have some idea of where the new quantity is, but we know Q double prime is less than Q prime, but we don't know whether Q double prime is greater than or equal to or less than our original quantity. So we can say this on the side here. Price decreases relative to both Q and Q prime. And my handwriting is horrible. If I were grading this, I would be a little upset. But it's no points are ever deducted for handwriting. And the second is quantity decreases relative to Q prime, but is indeterminate relative to Q. Okay, because we don't actually know its relationship to our original quantity. It depends on the magnitudes of the shifts of the demand curve and the supply curve. Okay, so I believe we've answered everything in this question. What happened to the market after both? And we've fully described the relative changes as we've moved through this informational landscape, informational and technological. Okay. So the last part is about a price floor. So, and this goes back to our original setup. So I'm actually going to run back up here and pick up this graph. And if I'd been nicer to myself, I would have included the original curves. So I wish we could copy this, but I don't think we can. Let's see if I can get this from memory. So we have price is equal to 10 minus 1/2 QD, and price is equal to 1/5 QS. Let's just double check that. Yes. Okay. So first we're just going to check that the price floor, well, this isn't even sensible. Who wrote these questions anyway? I have an invisible finger pointing at myself. Okay. So let's maybe actually set this at so let's set this at 5. 5 is greater than 21/7, which is 3, which is greater than 20/7. Okay. So we have this price floor. So we'll use a lower bar, and it's equal to 5. So our conception of equilibrium, right, is we have these incentives that push us towards the place where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. But we get stuck. We're restricting our interval to be above 5. Our interval of allowable prices is above 5, which means we get stuck. So our price is actually 5. And what we need to do here is solve for the two quantities. So here we can see that quantity demanded is going to be smaller, and quantity supplied is going to be larger than our original equilibrium. So we're going to get this, we're going to get a surplus. Or sometimes the terminology I prefer is excess. Either one works in my book. But surplus is actually the one that that most classes use and that the textbook uses. You'll see why the terminology gets a little complicated later. Okay, so what we're going to do is just solve for these two QDs. Two quantities. The first is QD. So let's plug in a price. We have 5 is equal to 10 minus 1/2 QD. And that leaves us with 1/2 QD is equal to 5. So then QD is equal to 10. And then secondly, when we plug in 5 into the supply curve, we get QS is equal to 25. Okay, so we get a surplus of 15. So that's one of our results. And we get our two quantities. And just for completeness, we'll say that the price is equal to P lower bar, which is equal to 5. Okay. So we've found quantity supplied and quantity demanded after the policy, and we've illustrated the effect the policy had on the market. But we can maybe write a sentence here, just describing what we've seen. So the policy was binding. So the price is set at P lower bar equal to 5. Then we can say, then there was a shortage, excuse me, a surplus of 15 with, well, I'd just leave it there. And then we can label our results on the graph here. So because we have a lot of things going on the bottom here, I'm actually going to label it up top, where we have QD is equal to 10 and QS is equal to 25. If you didn't put it on the graph, that's going to be just fine. It just makes it easier to sort of interpret what's going on. Okay, so it's a little messy, but this would receive full credit. This is maybe a little bit longer than the mini exam you'll see tomorrow. I'd expect, I mean, this took me, somewhere around 20 to 15 to 25 minutes. So this is on the longer side. So as you're setting your expectations, you can maybe expect something a little bit shorter. But this is generally the type of questions that you'll be presented with, not just on mini exam 1, but on basically all of them in this class. Okay. I am looking forward to seeing all of you in class. Okay.